Watch the video version of this podcast at outlatewithdavid.com.
Hi, I'm David Cotton. I'm a father, a brother, a son. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, a former senior executive in the Department of Defense, a corporate vice president, and now a life coach. At the age 59, I told my wife, my kids, and the world, I'm gay. Join me as I talk with others who've made this coming out journey late in life to become who they really are.
You're listening to Out Late with David.
My guest today is a retired trial lawyer who came out to his wife and kids at age 42, 20 years into his marriage. After years of remaining married, he finally divorced, giving up most of his worldly possessions. He went on to rebuild his fortune, married again to a man this time, and became an activist for gay rights. Joining us today from New Orleans, attorney Larry Best. Well, Larry, welcome. I'm so happy that you're joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your coming out story seems a little unusual, and from the aspect that you told your business partner before your wife. Why was that?
Oh, and she didn't like that either, because I'm very, notwithstanding my being deceitful about my sexual orientation, I'm an honest guy, and I was always honest with her. So when I came out to her, I admitted that I had told my law partner first. And I think the reason I did it, it's a combination of things. I had a trial coming up, and I was coming unglued. It was a big case. I had just come to this decision. I had to come out, and it was interfering with my focus and my concentration. I felt like I just had to get it off my chest. And I thought, well, this will be a dry run. This is a way to run through it, see how it goes. So
when you were driving to that trial, how did he react when you were telling him?
He reacted with a joke. He was very quiet at first, and then he said, well, I figured you were going to tell me you were either boffing Sheila, our receptionist, or you were going to tell me you were gay. And he said, I was kind of hoping it was Sheila.
Oh, wow.
He can be a witty guy. He has a very, very quick mind. I don't think that was really what it was on his mind to say. I think he was shocked. I think he didn't like it. I think he was afraid for his future because he was 7 years younger than me. We just started a law firm, and I think he thought we're going to crash and burn. And he was nearly right. But his mother wound up telling him he needed to stand by me. She was from New York. Well, they were all from New York. And so I appreciated that she did that, and he did.
So when you got around to telling your wife you'd been married 20 years, if I recall, you'd had 3 children.
Yes.
How did that work out when you told her?
Well, I don't know if anybody who's told. I'm sure there are people who've told their wives and it went well, but I haven't read those stories yet. It's always a shock to them, almost always, unless you admitted you were bi or something before you were married. But in my circumstance, it was a shock to her. And at first, the first thing she said, oh, I was so worried. She said, you've been so detached the last few weeks. You've been depressed. You've been not communicating. You've been downcast. I thought you had cancer and you were dying, and you were about to tell me the doctor told you it was over. That was her first reaction. So in a way, she was a little bit relieved. But of course, then as the moments passed and the reality sunk in, today she would probably think she was better off if I had done it.
So she was a little bit relieved. What other emotions came out of her at the time after that relief?
Her initial anxiety, I think, was her health. She was convinced. She wanted to know the details of how I figured this out and what had been going on in my life. And I summarized it in a short way in about 5 minutes, which included the fact that I had never been with a man all the years of our marriage until a couple of months before. I'd had one experience and then another one. And those were the experiences that made me realize I'd been living a lie. And I told her all this, and her next reaction was she was afraid I had given her AIDS. And I assured her that I had been very careful on both occasions, that there was no chance in the world that I had AIDS, and she wasn't buying it. She made an appointment with the doctor the next day to be tested. And of course, back in those days, in the early 90s, it took a long time to get your results. Anyway, so the first reaction was relief. The second reaction was fear and anxiety that I had thoughtlessly given her AIDS. And then the third reaction probably was a combination of anger and despair. And this continued over the next several weeks. We had a wonderful marriage. We really had 20 very happy years together. At least I did, and I thought that she had. And we had a good, honest relationship in all other respects. So I just tried to be there for her. She had good days. She had bad days. Mostly bad days. There was a day she was pounding on my chest in tears, angry at me, and I just stood there and let her pound. I remembered something I had heard or learned in therapy years before, where the therapist said that the job of the therapist was to be a bowl, just to be there for the patient and let them spill whatever they wanted in the bowl and hold it and be with them. So that's what I tried to do. I wanted her to know I was there for her. I didn't abandon her in any ways. I think that in the end, she probably felt she'd been abandoned, but
in reading your memoir that you wrote online, I had the impression that you felt the need to get married. You said getting married had been the ruthless act of survival. What did you mean by that?
Well, before I got married, actually, I was aware I'd been attracted to males from 14, maybe 13.
How did you know that when you had that feeling?
Because I was staring at them. I was thinking about their bodies all the time. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I'm feeling inadequate and inferior. And so I'm looking at them and wishing I were them. So I just lied to myself. I don't think I realized it was a lie at the time. And that worked well through college. And at high school, I dated girls. I fell madly in love with two girls in high school and one in college. And there was no doubt in my mind that I did and could love women and had great sex with them. So I said, well, this is apparently a bisexual part of me, and I'm just going to put this away and tuck it away because I can have great sex with women. I love women. I have loved women, but I've never touched a guy, and I could not conceive of ever loving a guy. So I said, well, if you've got physical relationships on both sides and love on only one side, it's a no-brainer. You're going to go and you're going to marry a woman. And I did it with some reservations. Even that summer, just before we got married, and I have a story about this as well. I went to a fraternity brother's house because I was losing weight. I was anxious. I was worried I'd made the wrong decision in getting married. And he was a very attractive guy who I was attracted to. And there were just some things about him that made me think he was something like me. So I went to his house to talk, and it did not go well. And when I went home, I said, wow.
Did you make an advance to him or something? Or
Well, very subtly. We talked for a while, and I talked about how I really wasn't sure this was the right thing to do. Maybe I wasn't the marrying kind. And he's sitting there. We're next to one another on a couch, but facing each other. And he's sitting there with his legs crossed in his boxer shorts. And I finally said, I thought maybe you'd understand. And I put my hand on his knee. And he had a look of horror. And he said, oh, I don't think I do. And anyway, it was disappointing. It was upsetting. And I just told myself, I said, hey, I've been accepted to law school. I'm engaged. I love this woman. We have great sex. This is a disaster. I just need to move on. There's no life for me if I don't move on. There's no career. There's no love. There's no respect. There's no nothing. And I didn't see a choice.
Why did you see no choice? You saw no life, no career, no nothing.
Because in 1991, in New Orleans anyway, if you came out as gay, I would have been fired. I figured it was a good thing in a way. I just started my own law firm because I couldn't be fired. Most people, I think, in those if you're in certain professions, if you're in the liberal arts, if you're in education, if you're in theater, a lot of artistic endeavors, I think at that time you could get away with being gay, but being a trial lawyer in the Deep South, and I didn't yet know I was going to be a trial lawyer, but being a respectable lawyer who would have a good practice and a good business, I didn't think it was possible. I'd never seen anybody openly gay at that time as a professional of any kind. I had absolutely no gay role models. To me, it was just a bunch of people looking for quick sex and one-night stands and physical gratification, and it was no life, no respectability. And I had not seen any gay life to the contrary anywhere.
So when you got married there for 20 years, had some thoughts, what was the event that actually then kicked that off?
I had started going to gay bars about 3 or 4 years before, only when I was out of town traveling on business. And I kept thinking I could, have sex with a guy because I desperately wanted to, but it just never happened. And I got used to nothing happening, and I would still go to the gay bars because I just felt I was me there when I was not me anywhere else. So just being in the bar, reading the bar regs, having a beer, it's like I could breathe. I could exhale. And so I did that. And then suddenly, just a couple of months before I told my wife, I was in an empty bar in Alexandria, Louisiana. And a guy comes in and he sits down next to me and starts chatting me up. And we wound up going back to my hotel room together. And he, too, was a married man with children. And it was just a wonderful experience. I didn't feel guilty. I felt fulfilled. I felt enriched. I felt real for the first time in my life. I felt complete. And I didn't even know this guy. I'd never seen him again since. So I said, okay, well, I'll go ahead and I'll just do this when I'm out of town occasionally, and it will scratch the itch and everything will be okay. And so then the next out of town business trip was to Boston to go visit my clients. And so I'm at the bookstore and I'm walking out of the bookstore and there's a sticker on the wall on the stairway down to Boylston Street in Boston. And it said, Dream Boys of Boston, and a phone number.
Dream Boys of Boston.
I called and set up an appointment. And he came up and had a very nice room. I had a bar and everything in a sitting area and views over Boston Harbor. And I really liked him. So I got back to New Orleans. It dawned on me, oh my God, you're in love with this guy. And you wouldn't think that would happen, but I suppose I was like an accident waiting for a place to happen, if you understand what I mean. And I said, you're in love with this guy. This is going nowhere. You're a fool. You have to put this aside. You have to forget this. But I couldn't escape the conclusion that, 20 years ago when I concluded it was impossible to love a man, I had been wrong. And here I had loved somebody I barely even knew in this violent, obsessive way. And I suppose I could have lied to myself again and said, well, this is just an infatuation. It's not real love. Let it go. But somehow my whole world came crashing down around me in that moment. And I burst into tears at my desk. And I remember the ink running as my tears fell on the page of my notes. And I said, I can't live like this. I can't do this another day. I got to be me, and it's going to destroy my career, and my family, but there's nothing I can do. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was suffocating. And the only way I could take a breath of air was to come out. And so it was a week or 10 days later, I told my law partner. A week after that, I told my wife. A few days after that, we told the kids. And a week after that, I moved out.
Wow,
because
that is fast.
Well, it is fast. And I heard lots of other people's coming out stories, and most people don't do it that fast. But I felt it was like a Band-Aid. I needed to rip it off quick. I needed to get to a new place quick. I thought it was better for everybody. Just let's get this done with, for me to live in the house and all this, pretend everything is going in a normal way. I didn't think I was capable of that. I knew my wife and I would not get along in the same way. The kids would know something was wrong. It was going to go to hell if I didn't come. So I said, I just got to be honest. And that's what I did.
More of my interview with Larry in just a moment. But first, I'd like to recommend a book I found insightful on my coming out journey. The book is Fashionably Late, Gay, Bi, and Trans Men Who Came Out Later in Life, edited by Vinnie Kinsella. The book is a collection of 16 narratives from individuals who navigated the complexities of coming out later in life as gay, bisexual, or transgender. In essence, their second coming of age. Through their stories, readers will find solace, inspiration, and a sense of community in their own journeys of self-discovery and acceptance. For more books and online resources about coming out later in life, visit outlatewithdavid.com. Now back to more of my conversation with Larry.
Let's go back to your wife then. So once you told her this story, did you decide you're going to get divorced when you moved out or stay together? How was that going to work on the family dynamics?
Oh, I didn't even think about divorce because remember, we didn't have gay marriage then. This is 1991. And the way I looked at it, it didn't matter. If I found somebody whether I was married to or not, it wouldn't affect what I was looking for, which was a relationship, a long-term relationship with a man. And so I thought, well, I can stay married to her because it's just simpler and it will give her a sense of security. And I assured her and the kids that their daily living circumstances would not change. They'd have the same house, the same rooms, the same cars, the same everything, and that I would move out and I would come back and visit them all the time. My wife and I actually discussed the possibility of getting an apartment where we alternated weeks and had the kids, but the problem with that was she couldn't stand the idea of being in an apartment where I was entertaining men, even though me and the men aren't there at the time. That was too traumatic for her. And so finally, I just thought, well, the best thing, it would be wonderful to have shared custody, but I'm working all the time and traveling all the time anyway, and she's a stay-at-home mom. So let's let the kids stay where they are and let's let her stay where they are. And I moved out and got an apartment. But a year later, I bought a small house in the same neighborhood where my family lived. And 18 months after that, bought a house right around the corner from them. So I wanted to be in their lives. They were my family. I didn't want to leave my family. It broke my heart to move out from my family, not to see my kids over the dinner table was just, one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with. But I went to all their school activities, went to if I was in town and able to, I went to the boys' basketball games or their track meets and all of their school functions. I was there. And I did what I could. I don't think it was optimal. I don't think divorce is ever optimal.
Mm-hmm. So you decided to divorce then in the end, is what it sounded like.
Well, in the end, yes. It was about 5 or 6 years later. The kids were, by then, 2 were in college and 1 was soon going to be out of high school too. And it just seemed, it's time. And I gave her everything we had.
What do you mean by everything?
Well, we had retirement savings I'd been investing in since I'd started practicing law. I gave her that. I gave her every penny that we had saved, all the equity in the house, all the contents of the house. I continued paying everybody's bills for years. I continued paying the kids' tuition, college, and graduate school. I was fortunate to be in a position to be able to do that and still support myself separately. And I didn't want to cause any more damage than I already had. But divorce to me at some point, just we're not living together, and I was in a relationship and had been for years. So I just thought, it's time to get the divorce and just get it on paper. And so that's what we did.
Why did you make the decision that everything goes? I know in my case, it was more of a negotiated percentage on many things, like 50-50 in some cases.
I just felt guilty. Two reasons. One, I felt guilty. And the second was I felt I've got enough earning capacity to survive this, And because she actually said, no, we should split stuff. And I said, no, I can earn more money than you, And so I also put her through college and graduate school.
Let's go back before the divorce when you told the kids. What were their ages and how did they react to hearing that mom and dad were having this different arrangement and dad was gay?
Yes. Well, my daughter was 15. My middle child is a boy. He was 13. They were about 18 months apart. And the youngest was a boy, 9. And I sat them all down and Julie was at my side and I told them the truth. I said, I'm gay. I didn't really understand that till very recently. I can't do this anymore. I still love your mother. I still love you. We're going to go forward, as a family. Your mother and I have agreed we will still be a family. She'll still be your mother. I'll still be your dad. And she and I are still going to make joint decisions about the family as we go along. So I said, the only thing that's really going to change is I'm moving out, but I'm still going to see you. I'm going to come over for Sunday dinner every week, and I'm going to go to your school activities, and I'm going to visit, and we're going to do things together whenever we get the chance. And that's what I did. The response, it was like talking to a stone wall. My daughter was obviously devastated. She looked like she was in despair, but she made no comment. At the end, when I said, Shirley, you want to talk about this? You guys have some questions, something you want to say? She got up and stormed out of the room. And middle son followed shortly thereafter without saying a word either. And the youngest said, can I go out and play? And he did. So I think there's the lesson for me was the sooner you come out to kids, the better off you are, and they are. The younger they are when you can come out to them, the better off everybody is going to be. It has always been the easiest in our family for the youngest and the hardest on the oldest, who was 15, which is a hard year for anybody. You're 15, you're an adolescent, things are tough. So her dad's gay. Her parents are getting divorced or separated, which was the distinction without a difference to her. And she was devastated.
So having been through this, 20 years ago and having time to reflect on it, is there anything you would do differently in your coming out process with your spouse at the time and your children?
No, I think maybe I would have tried a little harder to get my 2 older children to sit down and actually talk, but they were so distraught. They didn't want to talk. I guess they needed to process, and I probably should have followed up with more talk later. I probably could have worked harder at that. But in the end, my sons I have a wonderful relationship with to this day. And my daughter and I have a kind of off and on relationship, but it could be worse. And my ex-wife doesn't want to be in the same room with me, which is interesting because we agreed to co-parent. And for 20 years after I came out and moved out, we co-parented. We even went on 1 or 2 family. I took the family the next year on a cruise all together. I put the boys in one cabin and the girls in another cabin. I still love her. I spent 20 years with her. I have 3 children with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that.
20 wonderful years together. I wanted her in my life always. But, I'm not in her shoes. Her shoes are a tough walk, and I respect that, and I honor that as best I can.
As a life coach, I'm committed to help you discover the passions in your life and help you map a course to achieve the things you really want. Together, we will unwind those persistent self-doubts that are holding you back. You'll begin to see your passions more clearly and set achievable goals. Throughout your journey, I'll be there to challenge and encourage you in moving forward to discover your authentic self. For more information about my personal life coaching services or to arrange a complimentary consultation, visit davidcottoncoaching.com.
You're listening to Out Late with David.
Well, based on your coming out story, all that you've been through, you've had a chance to reflect on lots of things. You've written a lot of your story of before and after coming out. So on all of that body of knowledge and emotion and experience, what advice would you give to other men that are listening now that are at the beginning of this process, maybe trying to figure out their sexuality and whether they should come out and how they might do that?
Well, oddly enough, one of the first things I would tell them, I don't have an easy answer, but a good first step would be to join an online support group like Gay Fathers Worldwide that I'm a member of. And I have found that so helpful to so many people. And people join, and it's all confidential. It's private. If you're not a member, nobody can see it. So they can talk with safety and security. And the new member will typically come on and post a long thing about his experience. And then people say, oh, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And my story was like yours in this respect and mine. And they start exchanging things. And in addition to the comments online where all the members can see them, a lot of members, including myself, will say, hey, direct message me. We can talk on the phone. Because sometimes people just want to talk one-on-one. And I've talked with many, many guys one-on-one. And I don't remember a single one that didn't feel they benefited from the conversations. It might not have solved all their problems, but they had somebody to talk to. They weren't alone in the world anymore. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, for men coming out of mixed orientation marriages. They're called moms. It's being alone. It's having nobody to talk to, nobody who you know. And frequently they're living in a straight world. They don't know any gay people. Because what happens is when you're around other gay people, you begin to reconstruct your persona in odd ways. I mean, your personality doesn't change. Who you are doesn't change. But what you think of yourself changes because you're with other people who treat you with dignity and respect. And for many of us, that's a very refreshing experience. We haven't had that before. And we meet people who are like us. And it builds up your self-esteem and it helps straighten your spine to deal with all the problems you got to deal with. So talk to people. I recommend therapy. Anybody that's got big problems, they should go to therapy. Family therapy sometimes is an option to consider. Talking to people. But most importantly, just be yourself. Live your life. You only got one time around here. And you shouldn't be living somebody else's life. You got to be true to yourself. And the cost is high to you, to your loved ones, to everything. But don't know anybody that came out and regretted it. Not a single
soul. It takes tremendous courage, and a lot of times you don't see a light on the end of that tunnel, proverbial tunnel, but it is there. It just takes a while to get there.
You're right.
It takes a lot of patience.
So right.
Because as you talked about, some spouses are supportive at first and not later. Some are not supportive at first and are later. Some go up and down. Same with family and friends. You just have to live your life and be true to yourself. You can't control the others in your orbit. They're going to do what they believe is right for them. It's just best that we be honest with ourselves.
I think that's true. And I do think that it's worth every effort you can make to be there for your family, even if they're rejecting you. You got to keep showing up.
And make sure, too, they have a support system. So when you do come out to them, where is the spouse going to talk to? Like you said, you didn't put restrictions on anyone. You let them talk to others, communicate with others as they needed to.
Well, you bring up a good point. I guess if you're planning this, it might be a good thing to get a copy of Amity Buxton's The Other Side of the Closet and be ready to give it to your wife to show that you're concerned about her. And this will maybe be a first step for her. There are online support groups for those women too. I think you can encourage your spouse to get therapy, to get family therapy. There are a lot of other books. Loving Someone Gay is a good one. But, some people are not readers. Some people don't want to read about your life because they're too angry and it's all about you, and they get lost in the dust. And that's how the wives feel. So people coming out need to understand that the wife's perspective is, well, it's all party time and relief and happiness for the gay guy who's coming out. And everybody's happy for him and congratulating him, telling they're proud of him and what courage it took. And and then the wives, we're just left with nothing in the dust. And that generates a lot of anger and resentment. So I don't have a magic wand that I can give to anybody on how to deal with that, but it helps to be very aware of it, because you can deal with it better, at least if you know it's coming. And they have legitimate gripes. They're right.
I know I didn't give those books to my former spouse, but I did read them myself to try to understand the perspective of what might be going through her.
Well, that's another good thing to do. Yes, I think it's good for the guy coming out to do that as well.
But again, thank you, Larry, for your time, and I appreciate all that you told us today.
Well, thank you, David. It was my pleasure and an honor, and anything I can do to help anybody, I'm always happy to do.
As we know, there's no foolproof plan for coming out later in life, but I think Larry Best provided us some valuable lessons he learned on his journey to happiness. Larry stressed how important it is to keep showing up for your family, even if they're rejecting you. He also recommends seeking out support from groups like Gay Fathers Worldwide. As he put it, when you're around other gay people, your self-esteem improves because you're treated with dignity and respect. I believe that's true. Larry has published many stories about his life's adventures as a gay man coming out later in life, and you can find them all at medium.com. I'm David Cotton. Join us next time for Out Late with David.
To hear more episodes, visit outlatewithdavid.com. And to learn more about personal life coaching services, go to davidcottoncoaching.com.